Picture this. A hit family sitcom, millions of loyal viewers every single Friday night. And then, one by one, the faces you fell in love with start quietly disappearing from the screen, replaced by someone new like nothing ever happened. No goodbye episode. No explanation from the network. Just a different actress standing in the kitchen wearing the same name tag. If you ever wondered why Last Man Standing kept swapping out its own family, the real story is messier, more human, and honestly more interesting than anything the show itself ever put on screen. So let's get into it. When Tim Allen signed on to headline Last Man Standing in 2011, he wasn't some desperate actor grabbing the first offer that came along. He had actually turned down other lucrative television deals around that same period, because after years away from a weekly series, he wasn't interested in just playing a rehash of Tim Taylor from Home Improvement. Series creator Jack Burdett pitched him something different. Mike Baxter, a marketing director at an outdoor sporting goods company, a guy who felt like an older, more grounded, more opinionated version of the character that made Allen famous in the 90s. Allen reportedly passed on the idea more than once before he came around, and part of what changed his mind was being brought on as an executive producer, giving him real influence over where the show would go creatively. That influence would end up shaping the show's identity for the next 9 years, especially once the writers leaned into Mike Baxter's conservative politics as a defining trait of the character. ABC clearly had big ambitions for the series. The network placed it in the Friday 8 p.m. slot, a time period that had chewed up and spit out plenty of sitcoms before it, betting that Allen's name recognition alone could anchor the night. It worked. The premiere in October 2011 pulled in a massive audience for the network, and the show held its time period comfortably for years afterward, eventually running 6 seasons on ABC and building a devoted, if slightly older-skewing, fan base. Which is exactly why so many people were caught off guard when the cast started shifting almost immediately. The first big change came before Season 1 had even finished airing. Actress Alexandra Krosny played Kristin, Mike and Vanessa's oldest daughter, a teenage mother trying to raise her son while juggling work and living back home with her parents. Fans responded well to her chemistry with Allen, and the character had real emotional stakes built into her storyline. But in the summer of 2012, ABC quietly let Krosny go, citing creative reasons without getting much more specific than that. Reporting at the time pointed to the show wanting to shift Kristin's arc, aging the character and her son up so the writers could put her in more direct conflict with her father over political and social issues, rather than keeping her locked into the young single mom storyline from the pilot. There was also an odd wrinkle behind the scenes. Even though Kristin was supposed to be the eldest Baxter daughter, Krosny was actually younger than Molly Ephraim, who played the middle daughter Mandy. Bringing in an older actress solved that visual mismatch. Amanda Fuller stepped into the role starting in Season 2 and stayed with the character for the remainder of the series, eventually becoming one of the most consistent presences on the show. Kristin's on-again, off-again baby daddy went through his own revolving door early on. A very young Nick Jonas played the character, known in the show as Ryan, in a brief guest appearance during the first season, introduced as an immature ex-boyfriend who'd skipped out on his responsibilities. When Tim Doyle took over as showrunner heading into Season 2, the plan changed. Doyle wanted Ryan to grow into a real recurring character who could go toe-to-toe with Mike Baxter on ideas, not just show up as a punchline. Jordan Masterson took over the role and stuck with it, and over the following seasons the writers gave Ryan a genuine arc, eventually having him launch his own cannabis business, which let the show poke fun at how a one-time deadbeat kid had somehow become a small business owner more entrepreneurial than Mike himself. Then there's the character of Eve, the Baxter's youngest daughter, played by Caitlin Dever for the show's entire run on both networks, though her presence on screen thinned out dramatically over time, and that story is really about a young actress' career taking off far faster than anyone expected, which we'll get to shortly. May 2017 is when things really blew up. ABC announced it was canceling Last Man Standing after 6 seasons, and the news landed like a gut punch for a fan base that had watched the show consistently place among the network's better-performing comedies. The show had been drawing solid, dependable audiences for years, and the timing felt especially strange coming not long after Allen made headlines for comparing the experience of being an outspoken conservative in Hollywood to living in a repressive regime, remarks that immediately fueled speculation online that politics had played a role in the cancellation. ABC's entertainment president at the time, Channing Dungey, pushed back directly on that theory, explaining that the decision came down to business realities rather than ideology. ABC didn't actually own the show outright. It licensed it from 20th Century Fox Television, which meant the network was footing a large licensing bill while the studio collected most of the long-term revenue from streaming and syndication. With Allen's contract up for renegotiation and production costs climbing the way they typically do once a series ages past its 5th or 6th year, the math reportedly stopped making sense for ABC, especially with other programming priorities competing for that same time slot. Whether politics factored into the decision at all remains something people still debate to this day, and there's no way to fully settle that argument since a network's internal reasoning isn't something outsiders can verify with certainty. What is verifiable is that ABC gave a financial and structural explanation, and Allen publicly disagreed with it. Whatever the real mix of reasons, the fan reaction was immediate and enormous. Tim Allen said on social media that he felt blindsided by the network he'd called home for 6 years. Co-stars Nancy Travis and Hector Elizondo publicly expressed how much the cancellation stung. A petition calling for the show's return quickly gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures, and fans flooded social media with hashtags demanding the series come back, some even sending toy tools to ABC's offices as a nod to Allen's handyman persona. It became one of the more visible fan-driven Save Our Show campaigns of that era of television. That pressure, combined with 20th Century Fox Television's obvious financial interest in keeping the show alive, eventually paid off. A year after the cancellation, Fox announced it was picking Last Man Standing up for a 7th season, framing it explicitly as a response to the outpouring from fans. Getting the revival together on a tight turnaround wasn't simple. The original sets had already been dismantled once the show wrapped at ABC, so crews had to rebuild everything from scratch, and the writers' room had only a matter of months to turn around new scripts before cameras started rolling again that fall. The gamble worked, at least commercially. The Fox premiere drew a strong audience, proving there was still a real appetite for the Baxter family. But bringing the show back also exposed just how much life had moved on for some of the actors during that year off the air. Molly Ephraim, who'd played Mandy for 6 seasons, had already accepted other acting work once she assumed the show was finished for good, taking on projects rather than sitting around waiting to see if a revival might happen. By the time Fox's offer came through, she wasn't able to walk away from those commitments, and she chose not to return to the role. Rather than writing Mandy out of the story completely, producers opted to recast the character, bringing in Molly McCook. The response from longtime viewers was rocky at first. A wave of fans pushed back hard online, upset about losing the actress they'd watched for 6 seasons. McCook leaned into the differences rather than trying to disguise them, and over time, as the writers built out storylines around Mandy's ambitions in fashion design and her marriage to Kyle, a good chunk of the audience came around to her version of the character. Caitlin Dever's situation played out differently, and it's really a story about an actress' career accelerating at exactly the moment her show came back from the dead. During the year Last Man Standing sat cancelled, Dever landed a role in Kathryn Bigelow's acclaimed film, Detroit, and that opened the door to a run of major opportunities. She went on to star in Booksmart, which became a critically praised hit, and she headlined the Netflix limited series Unbelievable, a performance that earned her nominations at both the Golden Globes and the BAFTAs. With her career suddenly moving at a completely different pace, staying on as a full-time series regular on a broadcast sitcom simply wasn't realistic anymore. Rather than lose her from the show entirely, the writers shifted Eve into a recurring role, sending her character off to the Air Force Academy as an in-story explanation for why she'd be showing up far less often. It gave the writers a built-in excuse for sporadic appearances and the occasional video call scene to keep her connected to the family without requiring her on set every week, and Dever continued popping in when her schedule allowed it, all the way through to a brief appearance in the series finale. By 2020, with the show still performing respectably in the ratings, Fox announced that Last Man Standing would wrap up after its 9th season. It wasn't framed as a low-rated show limping to the finish line. Producers had reportedly floated ideas for a potential 10th season, including a storyline where Kristin would take over the family's outdoor supply store and rebrand it, but ultimately the decision was made to close the book on the series instead. For the finale, the creative team pushed for something bigger than the show's usual small-scale family stories, eventually landing on a crossover appearance from Alan's earlier sitcom character, Tim the Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement. Because that earlier show was owned by a different studio, folding the character into Last Man Standing required a fair amount of negotiation between the two properties before the appearance could actually happen. Alan reportedly wanted the crossover handled carefully, making sure Tim Taylor felt distinct from Mike Baxter rather than just a repeat of the same guy in a different house. And the finished episode wove in references to Home Improvement as a send-off both to that earlier series and to the show that had just spent 9 years across 2 networks, proving that even the biggest sitcom families rarely make it to the end with the same faces they started with. So when you look back at the full picture, Last Man Standing wasn't torn apart by some single dramatic falling out behind the scenes. It was a mix of ordinary things that happen constantly in television: a producer wanting a character to skew older, an actress age not matching the role on paper, a licensing dispute between a network and a studio, and more than anything, actors' careers simply moving at their own pace, sometimes faster than a show's uncertain future could keep up with. It's easy to assume every cast shakeup hides some juicy scandal, but a lot of the time the real answer is just people making reasonable choices about their own careers while a business built on quarterly budgets and licensing fees works out the rest. What do you think was the biggest turning point for this show? The recasting drama, the cancellation, or the jump to Fox? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want more deep dives like this one, stick around for what's coming next.